first part of the fight as Crawford's downloading all that information, but eventually Crawford was stronger than this incredibly strong, durable guy.
All right, Dre and Timmy, what do you say we go through the full highlights of what we saw over the course of 10 rounds between these two? And, you know, what you expected in the first round you got to max point?
And that's how you need to operate. But, you know, the patience was the thing for me. I thought Porter sat on the outside. You know, he moved, you know, laterally. He would, you know, change his rhythms up. He would feint, and then he would come behind whatever Terrance would throw. And that was the jab. That's what he would do. And, you know, when he got inside, he would work his hands. Both hands up and down. And if he had one hand free, he would work that opposite hand. Just to frustrate Terrance, just to get to him on the inside.
There was the clash of heads in the third round, Dre. There was the clash of heads the other way in the sixth round, so both guys had to deal with the cut.
Has to be expected the way Porter fights, but thank God it wasn't too many clash of heads.
Yeah, both fighters cut over the eyes due to headbutts. They fought through it. Give Shawn Porter a whole ton of credit. There's a lot of fighters, as soon as they get cut, they try and stop the fight and go to cards. Both fighters hung in there.
He eked out those rounds, but Terrance Crawford is a competitor. You can't measure that. You can't rate that. You either have that or you don't. You take the instructions your corner tells you, and you have to internalize it and go find a way, and Terrance Crawford found a way tonight.
That's how it ended. Terrance Crawford, we talked about the body work. The left hand to the body was there all night long. He landed 28 of them. 28.
They were devastating. Those were devastating. Those were the best power shots of the fight.
They were digging. He was digging underneath with that
man.
left hand time.
That left uppercut to the body changed the fight for him. Point blank.
Kenny Porter, who comes up on 98.
Oh, and look who was spotted in the crowd. But okay, let's talk about punch stats.
65 power.
98 landed for Terrance Crawford and 328 thrown. Threw more punches, landed more punches.
To Shawn and to Kenny. Shawn, and they have a wonderful relationship, and they're very open, very honest. If you ever listen to any of the All Access of when they're training, stop, he listens, he's very direct, he holds him accountable, holds his son accountable all the time. He said, my dad's doing what he's supposed to do. We've never directly spoke of it, but you got to understand there was a tacit understanding that if ever you feel like it's going this way, you go ahead and do it. But then Kenny's reaction of saying his son didn't prepare a certain way.
That was the most surprising thing that I heard all night, because I expected him to say, yes, he was hurt. I'm not going to allow my son to be in danger against a guy in Terrance Crawford who is the ultimate finisher in the sport today. So I'm taking care of my son so he can live to fight another day. Those were the words I was expecting to hear from his father and trainer. And Mark, you and I had the conversation before the fight to say, hey, if something were to happen, I actually spoke with Kenny Porter, and he told me that he would be willing to throw in the towel if necessary. But I never expected it to happen, because it wasn't that bad. From what we've seen in terms of Shawn Porter in his career, what he's been able to come back from, what his character has been, I didn't expect this to be the way it ended.
But I thought, Dre, you nailed it with your analysis of saying, you know what's about to happen. And you know who you're opposite with. And the temple shot's a little different, and he was down on the one knee, but you know exactly where this is going. Let's go back to that soundbite that Bernardo was able to capture.
What prompted you to stop the fight tonight?
Honestly, it's preparation. He didn't prepare like I wanted him to prepare. So
that's what he had to say. Y'all hear it. That's what he had to say.
Blindfolded, and you're in a deficit like that. So I wasn't going to let that happen to him.
He looks in great shape, but only you knew what happened in the gym.
I asked him when we met last week, listen, we've seen a lot of bad stuff with fathers and sons. If you find yourself in that position, I got no problem. I will throw in the towel. Now, as harmonious and loving as those two are, I did get this odd sense that it was whose ego was going to win, who is more hard-headed. I guess that came out afterward. But ultimately, the priority with Kenny Porter is what the priority has always been with Kenny Porter, as strange as that ending was, to protect my son.
Listen, I commend Kenny Porter for throwing in the towel if he felt the way that he felt, because oftentimes we're having a different discussion on these platforms talking about why did a father allow his son to take an enormous amount of punishment. So I give him credit for that. Once again, I could have done without the comments after the fight. And again, Kenny Porter can do what he wants to do. That's his son, that's his team, that's their thing. But on the outside looking in, some things are meant to be spoken online and some things are meant to be spoken offline. I just don't think it would, it just wasn't in good taste, because it looks like you're making excuses and you're taking away from Terrance Crawford, but then you're putting Shawn Porter out there right after he gets stopped in the biggest fight of his life. I just don't understand the timing of that. I don't understand why he shared that. Kenny is old school, and guys like him, you don't share your business. And that's not something I would think that Kenny Porter would share, especially the first few words out of his mouth in a post-fight interview.
I just think Kenny Porter's just being honest, and he's being honest with the fans, and he's being honest with his son. I don't have a problem with what he did. Honestly, this brought me back to your piece when Kenny lost his brother. It was his responsibility, and it felt like he was inside the ring. He was seeing his son about to get knocked out, and before it can happen, he stepped in and he said enough already. And he knew that he wasn't prepared, because he told us he didn't work hard enough. He wasn't disciplined enough during the training camp. So I applaud Kenny for saying what he said, because what that's going to do is that's going to challenge your son mentally. Do you still want to do it? This was the biggest fight of your career, and you weren't listening. You weren't paying attention in camp. You weren't doing the things that you needed to do to be prepared for Crawford.
That's not the way I see it, although I think you can see it from a couple different angles. The way I see it is also, I'd like to refer back to Mark Kriegel's piece. Kenny has a need for control because he felt out of control, and you can read Mark's piece about his little brother being hit by a car and killed when he was 4 and his little brother was 3 years old. And since then, how he feels like he has to control the world for his family. And I think what we saw just then was a sore loser and a father who has to protect his son's ego, because his son will not make excuses, so he'll make the excuses for him. He loves his son, and he's got to protect what must be now a damaged ego. We see this with fighters sometimes, but that is not Shawn's style. So I guess his dad did it for him, and I think that comes out of his dad and organically anyway.
I don't know. He put it on the preparation. I'm kind of with Dre. I don't understand it.
Well, that was Kenny Porter right after the fight with Bernardo. I'm sure an interview that'll be replayed many times in the course of the coming days as Shawn Porter suffers the loss. First time he's ever been stopped in his career. The close, razor-thin other losses, competitive fights against the other best welterweights, and Crawford gets the 10th round TKO, and that the status. But our own Andre Ward knows what it's like to have that number 1 next to his name, and he put his thoughts together for us.
Respect is a feeling of deep admiration for someone elicited by their abilities and achievements. It's a simple word that holds an exorbitant amount of weight. Fighters risk their lives and fight their whole careers in order to achieve a level of respect that we all crave. You don't have to like me, but you will respect me. Respect is a commodity that is earned, not given. Fight in and fight out. Respect is subjective. Some acknowledge your brilliance, others won't. That is until subjectivity becomes factuality. When two warriors landing devastating blows in front of thousands of fans, each bell bringing a thunderstorm into the ring. Beyond a fight, it was a test of will. Each punch thrown making us wonder, who was going to impose their will on the other? Would it be Bud Crawford or Showtime Shawn Porter? Then came the moment that the challengers met the standard raised, and the fight won. More than just keeping an undefeated record intact, Crawford finally left no doubt of his greatness.
I'll leave it at that, man. Crawford proved he is number 1 pound for pound.
So once all
at
is
minimum,
said and done, and the victors
and he's likely the best welterweight in the world. There's only one fighter that can prove otherwise. So we'll see. If that fight gets made, y'all know what it is. Crawford Porter. Crawford by knockout. 10th round.
It's a great compliment to Tyson Fury.